Great, looks like we're live. Welcome to today's episode on the Inspired Yoga Teachers Group. For those of you who are new to this group, warm welcome to this group. This group was created to support you to be able to teach better from a place of true knowledge and to be able to guide you, to be able to teach classes that empower your students and leave them feeling better than when they left the class, when they entered the class, So for those of you who are tuning in live, please leave a comment in the comment box. I would love to hear from you. Let me know where you're tuning in from today and how you're feeling today. It's Friday. Welcome to Friday. So today's topic is the cueing framework that I would like to share with you guys, and I'll offer some tips later on as well on how you can enhance your cueing. But before we begin, I want to invite you to start to think about how you're already cueing now. Is there a specific framework you're using? Or are there a fixed set of cues you are memorizing from your yoga teacher training? Or maybe you heard the cues from some other teacher that you've followed, or from your own teacher whom you were a student to for many years. So feel free to leave them in the comments. I would love to find out more about how you are cueing now. Is there a guideline? How do you go about? Is there a system to begin to think about it? So for all the different kinds of things, I like to see them not in a sense of remembering or memorizing the exact things, the exact details relating to a specific situation. Because one of the best things you can do as a yoga teacher is to understand the underlying framework or the underlying processes. When you understand a process, when you understand a system, this system can be applied to any given situation. And you don't need to memorize every single detail that, warrior 2, I have to say this cue for the foot and this cue for the leg and so on and so forth. So I already touched about some guidelines for how to cue. And those specific guidelines can be found in the earlier episodes or the earlier masterclasses on cueing. So one general guideline I want to reinforce again for those of you who are tuning in. I can see 5 of you are tuning in, which is great. Let me know where you're tuning in from. The first one, which is the most important, is to cue from bottom up. I just want to remind you that it always starts at the base, and the reason why I'm reinforcing this and reminding you is if you start from the top but the base is not stable, then you're not fixing the root of the problem. I'm going to say that again. If you start from the top but you don't fix the problem at the bottom, then you're only treating the symptom but not the cause. This is very important. So think about how you're cueing from bottom up. Don't start from bottom, start from bottom up. And usually a lot of problems start from the bottom. That's why they show from the top. Okay, so this is one point I want to invite you to start to think about. And also please definitely leave some comments so I can see. And this is more a Q&A, and I'll try my best to answer all your questions as much as possible today. This is really more of an interactive session. The more you share, the more you comment, the more I will be able to help you out, right, on any questions that you have. Okay, so let's dive into it. Why am I teaching you a framework once again? Because once you learn the framework, you apply it to any pose and it works, and you don't have to memorize for this pose whether it's 3 feet distance apart, whether your hand has to be this height, so on and so forth. Okay, so the first thing I want to teach you with this framework is to identify, and I call this the 4W framework because there are 4 W's in this framework, and I use it myself. The first one is where. So where in the body are you moving? Which specific part? So it's either where or which specific part. An important point here, this area should be your target area. What does that mean? So let's look at the stance of warrior 2. So for warrior 2, your legs are apart, right? And your front knee is bent. So the target area is actually your groin area, which is between your legs. You're spreading them apart and your front knee is bent, turning outwards. So you might also feel some sensation in your buttock muscle or your outer glute area, outer thigh area of your front leg. So that's what's going on in the lower area. And also your upper body, then your arms are straight, right, at the height of your shoulders. So let's set aside the arms just for a moment. So we go bottom up, right? So you start with the feet and you tell your students begin to widen your feet because we want to stretch the groin area. So already you talk about why and you talk about where. So why is it so important that we talk about the why? This hones back to the idea of the masterclass that I talked about on interoception. The best thing we can do as teachers is to guide students to learn how to feel from inside of their bodies, functional yoga, as compared to moving from outside of their bodies. Oh, it has to be this arm length, the foot has to intersect the arch, of the back foot, your arm has to look like this. And as we all know, I know some of you might not have had such an in-depth study of human anatomy. Okay, I would encourage you to continue studying, and later on I'll share more exciting information. As yoga teachers, your students, right, if you have not taught many classes, after your yoga teacher training, and I know there are a couple of experienced teachers in the group, you will find that all the students you teach don't look like the people in the textbook. They don't look like, for example, BKS Iyengar in Light of Yoga. They cannot do the leg behind their head, the kind of poses to those extents. And some of us, as yoga teachers in this group, very fortunately can. Why is this the case? Because of skeletal variation. Skeletal variation. So your bones, the length of your bones, the angle of the bones, how deep the sockets are, how one joint is connected to the other. I did talk about this in one of the earlier episodes about how, for example, you can see I have a hyperextended elbow, you can see. And this is a natural variation. I don't feel any pain when I do this. And this is normal. And this is more common in Asian arms than Western or Caucasian skeletal structures. So there are many other variations. For example, how wide your pelvis is. Male pelvises are more narrow because they don't involve childbirth. Female pelvises tend to be wider. And this is why some poses, for example, when we are balancing in boat pose, Navasana, it's usually easier for females because you have a wider sit bone to balance on than for males, right? So already we know there's skeletal variation. So this means that there's no universal alignment. And for those of you who are still going through your yoga teacher training, I'm so sorry to leave this information with you at this moment, and you might still find it hard to believe, and you might still not believe me, but that's okay. What's important is today you listen, you take this information yourself, and then you question, you ask yourself, does she make sense? Experiment, look at your students, look at real bodies and compare and ask yourself, when they do this pose, why can't they do that? So the reason why some people cannot do some poses, two reasons. The first one is skeletal structure. The second one is because of compression, or we call it tightness. So for example, when I do a forward fold, because I have been stretching or doing yoga or dance or all kind of movements for a long time since I was 9 years old. So I naturally have the flexibility in some muscles, and my muscles are not tight. But my husband, Luca, who is not someone who is very sporty, he used to play basketball, but those involve different kind of exercises and different kind of engagement. It involves more of twitch muscles rather than holding poses for a long time. So he is very tight in the muscles. So this one, the second reason, this tightness, it can be worked on. So when we stretch in the poses, if you stay longer, if you practice yin yoga, combination of yin and Hatha yoga, vinyasa yoga, you do running, other kinds of things, it will help over time, your mobility and your flexibility. But there is an extent to which this can be done. And some people will never, even if you do it for 10 years, 20 years, until you're 80 years old, you might, even if you stretch every day, never be able to get your leg behind your head because your bones are not adapted for it. So this means that we cannot give the same blanket cue for every single person. And this is why it is so important to say why. This is so important to say why we're doing the pose, what is the benefit of that area, what are we stretching. and where it is, so students can feel that part, and they don't have to look from the outside to see if they look like you, because they won't look like you. Some students will look like you and some will not, and that's what it is. All right, we have to accept that. And okay, so I want to apologize quickly for the audio. You might hear some knocking because my neighbors have been doing construction work for ages. So this is the best I can do with a mic. I hope you can still hear me fine. So the two first whys are where you feel the pose and why you're doing it. You're stretching or you're doing contraction. For example, if we do weightlifting, you bring your hand inwards towards your shoulder to contract this muscle and strengthen this muscle. This is the example. And then, for example, going back to Warrior 2, you spread the legs out to stretch the groin area, right? So then the students can play around, they can stretch, they can experiment with how wide the feet are. Some students might do it only 3 feet distance apart, and then they are really tight and they feel a lot in the groin area already. They cannot look like you, they cannot bring their legs so wide. We have to understand that yoga teachers, most of us, are already really flexible. A lot of us chose this profession or chose to pursue this because we have the bone structure for it. Okay, so let's go on. So this is the third point already. What is the action, right? Widen your legs apart so that you can feel the stretch in your groin area or your inner leg area. Right? So this is very efficient. This is very effective. And then you can say, experiment or try a little bit wider, a little bit narrower, and find what feels good for you as long as you feel the stretch in the groin area, or as long as you feel the contraction or you feel some nice sensation in your outer left thigh, your left buttock. So you're explaining to students why you're putting them in those poses, and you're educating them as well. So over time, and I know this might be very different from what you learn from your yoga teacher training, but over time what you're doing is you're inviting students to start to feel, so they can understand, oh, I'm doing this pose for this benefit. Oh, great. So next time they know how far to go and they know what position works for them. Very important. The last W. So we had why, we had where, we had what. So why you're explaining to them what is going on, you know, the rationale, why you are doing this pose. Second thing is where, exactly where in the body. The third one is the action, what you are doing, right? Whether you're moving the arm in front, to the back, whatever. And then the last one is how long, how much, and how deep. This is very, very important, right? Because for a lot of students, they will look at you and they will think, I have to look exactly like the teacher. So some students, just from looking at them, you can know that they are really tight in some areas, or maybe they don't have the bone structure to do certain poses and they will struggle a lot. I'll give you one example. Sitting in a cross-legged seated position. You will notice, and some of you might experience this as well, when you're sitting cross-legged on the ground, some of your students' knees will be very high. Some of your students' knees will be low, almost close to the ground. And this means that how much they can turn out, externally rotate their leg bones or their femurs is dependent on their skeletal structure. So for some of them, it will be very easy to do poses like pigeon, figure of four, lotus pose. All these poses require external rotation. You are turning the knee outwards, right? On the other hand, for some students, they have their knees turned inwards. So some poses, like for the femurs, their leg bones, right, in the sockets, it's naturally turned inwards, and they have narrower or shallower hip sockets, or maybe deeper hip sockets. So there's a lot of variation. For some of them, they might find it easy to turn their legs inwards. So when they do this, this is internal rotation. So this means that they can do hero pose very easily, right? Sitting between the feet. So for some people, they do hero pose, they're just sitting in a kneeling position, or seiza as we call it in Japan. You're sitting in a kneeling position, and that is it. Some people cannot then sit between their legs, or they need a block underneath their buttocks. That's me, because I have a lot of external rotation in my leg bones, and I can do pigeon, I can do lotus, I can do all the externally rotating poses, but for the internal rotation poses, it's going to be difficult for me. So going back to the point of the last W, so why did I elaborate so much about this? It's very important to tell your students how deep they should go, especially if you're teaching a hatha class and there's a little bit more allowance for longer time. You should tell them something like, don't go beyond your edge. Go for something between 70 to 80%, or sometimes I even say 60 to 70%. Or just say you will be holding this for a few breaths, 3 to 5 breaths. So students know how to moderate. So they're working, but not working to push themselves to the extent of injury. And also, if you're doing movements with repetitions, you have to say we are going to do this for 3 times. If you're bending and then straightening the front knee, something I like to do is to pulsate in a pose. So let's say, use the example, to straighten the arm and then bend the arm. Same for arching over, side, and then come back. So they can feel the principle of the movement. So here we're stretching the right side of the body. Now we're going to lengthen. Feel the stretching along the right side of your body, and then inhale to come up. So then that's 2 times. So we'll do this 2 more times, stretching over the side, and inhale to come up. So this is one example. So you tell them how long, so they know how to stay. How deep, so they know how to adjust. And then lastly, how many times, if you need it in whatever class that you're teaching. And again, I know some of you have questions. Oh, if I'm teaching a vinyasa class, it is very fast, I don't have time. Then adjust. Very important. And I already talked about this in the previous master classes. I'm not a huge fan of very fast classes, especially for beginners. Why? Because beginners don't know what they are feeling inside. They only see from the outside. They think the pose should look like this. But why are we doing the pose? What is the benefit of the pose? So it is your responsibility as much as possible as yoga teachers. We did this yoga teacher training, your 200-hour, and I hope many of you will continue to study and deepen your knowledge, right, in anatomy, in cueing, in sequencing, in theming, in philosophy, to continue to educate yourself so you can better guide your students. So the onus is on you to guide your students. This is why it's very important in any class to always ask, is anyone a complete beginner? Like they've never really tried yoga before, especially if vinyasa flow or ashtanga or some other faster, like maybe you teach core power. So you have to find out if there are students who are completely new. Then I would recommend during the class, give them extra attention. Still, if you're teaching a group class, you should cater it to the majority of the students, but pay more attention to beginner students. And if possible, even try to slow down the pace. Why are we doing vinyasa so quickly? If you barely just get into the pose and then you have to leave the pose, what's the point? Is it a workout we're going for? If it's a workout, why are we not doing some other forms of exercises like HIIT, like cardio, like Tabata, which are maybe more efficient and more effective, right, in a workout? So these are the questions I want to leave you with to think about. So again, going back to the idea of vinyasa, vinyasa means to flow with the breath. So the breath must be there. So there must be time for your students to feel the breath. So this is why I still recommend to hold the pose for at least a couple of breaths. It doesn't have to be long like in a hatha class, but students have to feel that they can catch their breath. Not that they're like throughout the entire class. So this is my take on it. And of course you're welcome, and I know that you might have different constraints. Maybe you're teaching for a studio and they have a specific sequence. Work around with it. Ultimately, it is your class. It is your students. It is your life. Your yoga. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. So that was why. Why are you doing this pose? Which area are you stretching? Which or where? So talk about the target area, then talk about what. What is the action involved? And then last is how. How long, how deep, how much, how how many times. So this is very, very important. And this applies to any single pose. So I know some of you came here thinking that, oh great, she would give me a formula and I would, understand everything immediately. I'm sorry to say, like those of you who have been with me in masterclasses, I never like to give the answer immediately. I always teach you how to figure it out yourself. And then you have to think. You have to think using this framework. If we apply this to the pose of, say, eagle arms. Let's try eagle arms and I'll end off with an example. And then I'll see if any of you have questions. So what is the goal, or what is the purpose? Let's just look at the upper body, because I'm here with the upper body. It's a little bit easier, and probably some of you are seated or lying down, right, watching this video. So eagle arms, what does it do? We cross the arms in the midline, right? So we bring the arms, this is called adduction. Bring the arms, so this is from the apart together, so this is neutral, right? Neutral, so at the sides of the body, and then we cross them over in front of them. And then what are we doing? We're hugging yourself. So this is the first option usually for eagle. And some people cannot do this. You will see them do this. And this is it. Maybe they have some sensitivity in their shoulder area. Maybe they have some mobility problems with their back, with their shoulder joint. So you have to offer variations also and watch your students, observe your students. So the first option usually I offer is to begin to just hold yourself and hug yourself. And you talk about why you're doing this. So in this pose, we are going to explore your shoulder area, the back of your upper body, your spine. We're going to move your shoulder blades apart to stretch them. So here, begin to really hug yourself. Maybe you can even touch the back of your shoulder blades. And then from here, tell them to relax the shoulders. Why? Because the goal is to stretch the back of the shoulders, not to raise the shoulders towards your ears. So some of your students will do this, and then they will complain later on. They will say that, oh, my neck is so painful, So tell them which is the target area and tell them which other areas they should relax, they should not do, right? And then tell them to relax. So after they relax, you can offer them other options as you progress. So this is the other thing about how much. If you offer variations, you have option 1, option 2, option 3. So your students can progressively move. You don't offer them already the full variation. You come into handstand or you come into, this specific crow pose. Just like when we teach arm balances, it's step by step. Step 1, if you can do it, then we do step 2, and then we do step 3, and then maybe you try this variation, right? So at any point of time, when you are modeling, be sure to see your students, see which one of them they stop at step 1 and they cannot move to step 2. So let's go back to eagle arms. You're holding yourself, and maybe some students will stay here. And they are stretching. You can already feel, some of them can feel the stretching in the back of their shoulders. And the front of the chest is compressed. So you're moving the shoulder blades apart. This is called protraction of your shoulders, right? Okay, then the next option from here, how do we intensify? We bring the back of the arms against each other. This tightens the movement. And then what do we usually hear in the cueing? You lift your elbows up to the height of your shoulders, right? So this intensifies again the stretching at the back of the heart. And you can try this as you're watching this video if you're at home. Right? And some of your students will stay here. And maybe even you, if you're watching this video, you will stay here. Because you find that because of your bone structure, you cannot move further. And even stretching for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years might not help you get there. But does it matter? No, because the students understand the why they are doing the pose. So already if you see some students stopping here, that's fine. Let them be. And then if you see some students, they are here easily and their fingers can touch, then you offer them the option. Okay, those of you who have it, can easily let your palms touch, go ahead and let your palms touch. And then stay and tell them you are staying here, maybe you're breathing here in this position for 5 breaths. 5 slow inhalations and exhalations, and feel the stretch in the back of your shoulders as you're doing this. So you're giving them something to do while they're breathing, so they know where to sense and feel the sensation in the back of your heart. Another thing that I mentioned in the other master classes is very important. If you're not doing it already, you can demonstrate. So if you have 1, 2, 3 options, demonstrate all. But at the end, see all your students, and most of them who are doing, maybe they are doing option 2 or they're doing option 1, then model option 2 or 1. Don't model the final option or the most fancy one, the most extreme, the most deepest one. Why? Because we want to validate your students. Who needs validation? The people who cannot do the poses the most, not the people who can do, the variation, the arm balance, the handstand, they fall flat on the ground. It's not these people. You can just give them a verbal cue and say, those of you who have your arms in the full eagle variation, stay. And then they know that, okay, they're supposed to stay even if you're just doing this. So this is what I do all the time, and you want to validate the majority of the people, and sometimes not even the majority, but the people who need the support the most, the beginners who are still working through the poses. So this is very, very important. So once again, coming back to the recap of today's episode: why, where, what, and how. So this is your 4W framework for effective and efficient cueing. And again, if you can, please try to slow down. Don't cue so quickly. Don't try to cue too much. Understand what is the purpose and the function of each of the movements. If you don't understand, no worries. There will be a 5-day challenge coming up on this. If you're interested, leave your message and say, I'm interested, in the comments below. So in the 5-day challenge, I will break down all the most commonly practiced poses in a Hatha yoga class, in a Vinyasa yoga class, and we will explore and look at what is the target area. And I know for some of you this is difficult because in your 200-hour or even whatever your yoga teacher training you did, you just learned the pose from the outside. You didn't understand why we're doing the pose. You didn't understand which muscles are being stretched and what are the movements that are possible in each joint, in each body. So I know some of you also feel, I'm a bit scared about anatomy, or like, it seems like so complex. Do I have to study this for very long? No. So you don't have to remember the names of all the bones. You don't have to remember how long the bones are and stuff like that. You have to understand how they work. So you can guide your students, you understand the principles, just like what we're doing today, so that you can apply it to any given situation. And this is what we'll be doing in the challenge. So more details will be revealed closer to the date. But I want to see if any of you are already interested in this, because I will only run this if there's sufficient interest, right, in this challenge that will guide you through functional yoga. Yoga from the inside out, not from outside in. So you can empower your students, real people, not people on the cover of yoga journal or yoga magazine, right? But real people who have real pains, real aches, and need your real support. Okay, so with this, I've come to the end of today's episode. I hope you found today's cueing episode useful for you. If you have any feedback, if you found this episode great and helpful, please leave a comment in this masterclass in the chat so I know, and let me know which poses you're having problem with, you need help breaking down, you're not sure how to cue. Please leave them in the comments and maybe they'll be included in the 5-day challenge. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me. I hope you guys have a wonderful Friday ahead. Please take care and see you soon.